And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another show. Going to be reviewing. Well, we're back to Dawkins. I guess in my almost daily streaming binge here to try to catch up on content that I've missed over the last several weeks. Getting pretty close to getting to some recent stuff. I think this little conversation. Well, I don't know how old the conversation itself is, but I think this video, Clubhouse. This is from Clubhouse debates. I think this was dropped about 6 days ago, so only about a week old. Um, yeah. How was everybody doing? Hopefully pretty good since the last time I saw you, which was only, well, not even 24 hours ago. Um, just want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Spooky Bed Hair, he was first. Good to see you. God equals the square root of -1. Maya, always good to see you. Math Pig is here, and I am streaming at a time that I think is normally, his time. At least traditionally that has been the case. I don't normally go this early, but I wanted to do this one and then, I don't know, get it over with. I guess that's a terrible thing to say. My apologies to Math Pig if I'm stepping on his time slot. Jay is here. Let's see here. All right, Michael Deaton, welcome. And I think at this point that's been almost everybody. Wolfen, Kyle Ferguson, and Sal, and Stephen Hawley, and Pinworm, and I think that's supposed to be Bruce Bain. Josephus is here. Trudy Helm, Maria McIntyre, Red Fang's here. Good to see you, Red Fang. 8:30 at Awesome. Warren is here. Danny Thomas is here. Clump is here. And Garrison Fay. Welcome, everybody. So I'll quit listing your names off. Welcome to anybody that that's made it here live, and anybody that I missed in the live chat. My apologies, but you're welcome. Let's get into this one. So this one's not too different. This is Darth just being kind of particularly obnoxious about this with a guy named Stu. I've never talked with Stu before. Pretty sure he sounds Australian to me. I could be wrong about that. Australian, maybe New Zealand. And he seems like kind of a nice guy. And from the sounds of it, he's in where this kicks off. He's in the midst of a conversation with some guys that are pretty regular on Clubhouse, at least in the churchy circles, right? Matt Adams is at the top there. John Lee is in there. Johnny's in there. The guy named T that you can see on the screen, I'll enlarge this. I think that's the same guy. He used to go by the name Truthy. So, yeah. So, and I don't know if Stu is the only atheist in this particular group, but he seems like he's the only. He seems like he's the only one based on the conversation that they have. So, there's a little bit back and forth, and then Darth jumps in. So, okay. So, with that being said, I'm going to jump into this. Oh, hello, Randolph. I am kind of curious, Randolph. How did that debate go yesterday? I haven't gotten. I was working today, and I had an appointment in the middle of the afternoon. I have not gotten a chance to catch up on that one. But I will be going to Modern Day Debate. Probably be doing that later tonight when if I go out for a walk. Probably try and listen to that one. Kind of was thinking about you this morning and wondered how that debate went over. And I hadn't heard of the guy that you were talking with. I think his name was Samir. I don't think I've ever seen him around before. Okay, so I guess we'll get this one started. I don't know how volume is sounding at this point. I had it fixed. I think, yep, I just checked in on my side. It sounds like my voice is coming through okay. Let me know if the volume difference is really out of whack between me. Like if I'm booming through, but then the audio for the video is like really quiet and you're forced to kind of like keep hitting your volume, let me know and I can bring my gain down and then you can adjust accordingly. So, okay, this should work. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Here we go.
Objectively, it's about something they've seen. It's about, I looked at a flower, or I looked at the colors of a supernova, or I looked at the grains of sand on the beach, or I realized how many stars are in the sky, and I was filled with wonder. And humans, we've always been filled with that wonder since our ancestors stepped out of the African savannah and looked at the stars. It's a natural part of the human condition. And some of us feel they want to ascribe a being to that, an existence of agency.
But wouldn't that be
and I feel that's
case, Stu?
What's that, T?
Wouldn't that be an inductive case then?
I'm not sure on the whole inductive deductive thing. So would
Okay,
that be
so like
inductive?
an inductive case would be something like, if flower, then God, flower, therefore God, right? That would
I don't know where this guy's getting this idea of induction from, because what he's kind of laying out sounds like a modus ponens, and that's a deductive inference rule.
That would be, I'm making an induction from the existence of a flower to the existence of a god, right? But Johnny said it was a deductive case. So I'm wondering what Johnny would say differently there.
I almost get the impression that this happens later on, and I'm probably giving this away, but kind of listen to this, because T says this multiple times, and it almost sounds like he seems to think like induction and deduction are things being added to or things being taken away. Like there's almost like a an arithmetic kind of function happening with the type of the argument, as opposed to what I think actually Johnny does give a pretty decent, summary explanation of the differences, but.
Well, I mean, it's just like this. To me, it's not difficult. I mean, this is something that I think a 5-year-old can understand. For example, someone was talking about human anatomy the other day, and I commented on that. I said, look at the human anatomy between males and females. Females are equipped with eggs, and males are equipped with fertilizer. Well, now that, to me, shows...
Not the most romantic way to put it, but all right, I'm following. Yeah, they've got eggs on deck, and guys got some fertilizer to splash around. Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day.
Intent. That doesn't reflect chance, happenstance. This was just a roll of the dice that it became like this. This bears intent.
Intent. Okay, so I find that interesting. Like, okay, well, we have this a species of animal, and they're divided up into two different sexes, generally speaking, and so one can receive the fertilizer and has the eggs in order to like host life, and the other one's just splashing that around, as opposed to the intention of, like, say, animals that can just divide. Right, or can get themselves pregnant. Like they come equipped with the eggs and the fertilizer, no distinction needed, no pairing off required. A little bit odd. I wanted to address this. It's a little off topic, but Randolph writes, thanks for asking. My interlocutor yesterday was way off topic and stated in his opening statement that he'd be way off topic. Some of his arguments defeated his position. Well, I guess that made easy work for you. Now I know why you answered me that way in the DM message. Then you're like, yeah, you want to review a debate, maybe not that one. Sounds like maybe that guy like kind of took himself out. Yeah, Scott, I am on a streaming streak. I am trying to. This has been a little journey to see if I can get this like nailed down, like with this new laptop, to figure out like, am I going to keep this thing? So far, I think I got the volume right and the sound quality better. Somebody else had written something in here. That sounds more like an Eastern Kentucky, Western Virginia accent than Australian. Yeah, well, that guy, that's Johnny, and I think he might be from your neck of the woods, AJ. If I remember hearing some of his biographical information correctly before. No, Stu. Pretty sure Stu is from down under, and maybe a Kiwi. And if Stu is listening, and I get which one. My apologies. As long as you're not from Tasmania, Stu. Sorry.
And when you talk about intent, it's also definitional to design and purpose and planning. This is something an engineer does. This is not difficult. This does not require faith. This is just basic reasoning. I mean, this is like 101 stuff. This is not difficult at all.
Hey, Johnny, can I ask a question?
Well, it's difficult if you don't know if you're not familiar with it and you're trying to jump through, especially if you're trying to jump in and get how some of this stuff works in an elementary fashion by going into these social media arenas with these guys. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it can get a little stressful.
Fine question before I go back to work. I'm getting ready to get off a break here. Just wanted, someone said something about Stu, I think it was, said it didn't require faith.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, Stu's an Aussie. Okay. I will take your word on that. Oh, yeah, you were catching up at 1.5. That's fine. Johnny has a condescending load of fertilizer. But it's how God made him, Mr. Lumpkin, right? There was intent.
but I've been told by atheists multiple times that there's no defeater for solipsism. So my question to you is, if you think there's no defeater for solipsism, then don't you just simply have to have faith that the reality that you're experiencing is shared with everyone else, and that you're not a brain in the vat?
I trust.
Now, this is what
sorry.
atheists have told me. So I'm not real sure, but it seems like if you're
Yeah, but the problem with solipsism is that you're talking about somebody who's developing a skepticism about things that about their own subjective experience, and it's subjective experience that they can reach out to other people and begin communicating about that subjective experiencing and exploring similarities and differences with it, right? But for somebody who gets locked into solipsism, the idea behind that is that everything is just a manifestation of your own head. Everything just reaffirms that kind of notion that, it's nobody, that everything is just inside your mind. Everything is just a product of your mind. There are no real other outside agents. It's all you. Yeah, that's as far as I think want to go with that. I don't, that's the idea of faith in that sense. I don't think is quite what an atheist would try to lay out, but all right. Yeah, no defeater for hard solipsism or the hard problem of solipsism. If he can defeat it, then it's no longer a hard problem. Yeah, there's always this kind of thing bumping up against a human reason where we can't know things. You can't really know things to a 100% certainty. Whether you're talking about either your psychological conviction of that, or whether you're talking about some kind of exhaustive verification of it. I think in that sense, it leaves room for skepticism, and that leaves open the possibility of solipsism. But that hard problem of solipsism isn't exactly what a faith claim is. I think these guys get kind of carried away with this, because at the end of the day, they kind of want to. It seems to me that they want to shift the burden on what kind of claim they're making when they're stating that there's a God. It's different to say that you believe that there's a God. It's another thing to say that you know there's a God, or a God has been revealed to you in such a way that you know it, or even worse, that you know it and can't be wrong about it. A lot of that would require faith. I think they wouldn't. They would say otherwise, but
you're saying there's no defeat. If they'd say there's no defeater for solipsism, then ultimately it is a step of faith, right?
Yeah, I'd say I had that discussion with Darth too, and sorry, T. I'd say it's also trust. Like, there is the Bible system and the system I was raised as a Christian that has the God model, right? I feel I'm strongly convinced that there is much more of grounding and a sound argument for the universe without God than I feel convinced of the universe with God. So that's why I choose the universe without God.
What is that? What is your rationale that there is no God?
My rationale is...
No, I think that's interesting. He's already changed it, right? So Stu was talking about, he thinks that the explanation for the universe is better from a naturalist position than it would be than if you're trying to posit the existence of some kind of being, right? And a God, for lack... I don't think any of these guys are going to squirm away from it. If they start to, things are going to get even weirder than they've been. But the idea that it is a supernatural being. We're talking about something that is outside space and time. It defies normal explanations, right? They even say that trying to define it or trying to categorize it in certain physically or spatial temporal equivalents are category errors and all this kind of stuff. So it's supernatural. I think where Stu's getting is kind of into Graham Oppy territory, right? Because you're looking at comparative explanatory frameworks for different things, and you're looking for one that does the most explaining and makes the least commitments. And that's not going to be the one that posits the existence of a supernatural being, especially one that has the kinds of problematic, potentially catastrophic and contradictory traits that the God of the Bible, according to believers, seems to have. But that's not what Darth's getting at. Now Darth wants to know, okay, what's your rationale for knowing there's no God, right? I think that's kind of how he put it. Let's wind that back a couple seconds.
And I feel convinced of the universe with God. So that's why I choose the universe within.
What is that? What is your rationale that there is no God?
Yeah, what is your rationale that there is no God? But he's talking about explanatory frameworks, right? The better explanatory framework is the one without God, because it has fewer, it at least has fewer commitments. And in most cases, I think naturalistic or physical explanations of what the universe is, do a better job of explaining things. So more explanatory power, fewer philosophical commitments, just seems like a better deal. Darth wants to know what's his rationale for not thinking that there's a God. That's not exactly where he's going with that, but
Rationale is that the Bible is an ancient, archaic document, and it was useful in the time.
No,
that
that's
it was
a
written.
non sequitur.
Well, how's that a
What
non
you just
sequitur?
said is an absolute. What you just said is an absolute non sequitur.
But Darth's initial question really wasn't going to the heart of what Stu was talking about. Stu's talking about explanatory frameworks, and now Darth immediately is already asking a question larded up with what Darth usually comes after people with. He wants he wants the non-believer, the skeptic, to prove that there is no God. Certainly prove it,
Okay. Calling.
I don't
even
agree.
If
but
one
anyway.
even if one. Well, let me make my point. Okay. Even if one were to agree with you that the Bible is nothing more than a comic book, it wouldn't get you to the universal negative that there is no God.
No, but it would be a rationale for why someone doesn't believe in that God. And this is the distinction that Darth refuses to make during the course of the conversation, because if he's understanding the distinction, he's not charitable enough to point out when people start going down the wrong track, right? Is okay, well, even if I conceded with you that I thought the Bible was nothing more than a comic book, it doesn't follow that just because we think the Bible is totally false, that means that an actual God doesn't exist in reality. Sure, but it would inform my belief. It certainly informs my belief that if you and I are certain, and most people are certain, that this particular book is nothing more than a comic book, even a glorified comic book, that the God it claims is real isn't real. So now we could be talking about another kind of God, like a deistic God or a pantheistic God. But when this is brought up when the shoe's on the other foot and someone presents this to Darth, well, hey, what about the idea that, like, I don't think you want to talk about a deistic God or a pantheistic God. You want to talk about the God of the Bible, because as Darth has pointed it out, that's the only God. It's not only the only one that does exist, it's the only one that could exist, and it's the only one definitionally a God. It can't be missing any of the properties of the God that Darth is talking about, and he believes that those properties come out of the Bible. So what he's presenting right now is not honest. He might not realize that what he's doing is I don't know that he's intentionally setting this up, because there's two things. He could either be setting this up in a very dishonest way, or he could just be being extremely sloppy, or some combination of the two. I think Darth has it within him to be clumsy, incompetent, and malicious all at the same time. I think he's a Renaissance man of bullshit. But this problem that he's already set up here. Well, I could just concede that that's bullshit. This Bible's just fiction, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a God. Okay, but how many times and I'm probably rambling now, how many times has somebody else attempted to say that same thing? Yeah, sure. But the God that Darth is presenting necessarily is the one described by the Bible. So Darth could never concede that the Bible was a glorified comic book. He can't do that. By definition, it can't be done. So, and even if that didn't prove that there was an absence of all gods, it would prove, or it would be a very good reason for someone to remain unconvinced that the God contained within that glorified comic book isn't real.
So that's a non sequitur, sir.
No, but the ideology behind God is from that book. It's from the.
No, sir. Listen. Can you please respond to what I said? I'm very careful, and I chose my words to be succinct. Okay.
Yeah. No, you didn't. You're already being he's already being slimy and squirrely. Slimy. And I think I'm kind of mixing some things up there. Hogtie, good to see you. He writes, as we've seen many times before, and as Spatchcock has pointed out in previous videos, Dede asks for rationale or justification, but then reacts as if he clearly asked for sound deduction. Yeah. And he's already starting to do that, and he's just going to keep doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on that with Stu. Because Stu, I think, is going to do what a lot of people do in the course of this conversation and think that what Darth's asking for is, what's your reason for disbelief? And Stu's reason for disbelief is that he thinks that the Bible is just a story, a man-made story representing nothing more than imagination. Right, but that's not what Darth wants, and Darth is really bad. It is, as many times as I'm asking clear, concise, succinct questions. No, you're not, because if you were asking clear, concise, succinct questions, you would ask the person flat out, provide me a deductive argument for the non-existence of the Christian God. That's the question Darth should ask, not these half-assed, vague, ambiguous, what's your rationale for not God? Right, that's like something a kid under the influence of too much Kool-Aid might burble out before they pass out for an afternoon nap or something. That's just a weird way to put it. Clear, concise, and succinct. Do you have a deductive argument to prove the non-existence of the Christian God? Easy enough.
Okay. Kai Nielsen, who
for
was
God's
selected by
sake.
the Encyclopedia Britannica to write the atheist entry.
Kai Nielsen, if anyone can get in contact with Kai Nielsen, anyone, I don't know if, well, actually, is Kai Nielsen dead? I think he may have passed away a few years ago. If not, if he is still alive, well, actually, no, even if he's not, even if he has passed away, he probably had an estate. Someone needs to get in contact with his relatives, with his estate, and demand royalties for every time Darth drops this, because this is insane.
Wrote in one of his books, all of the reasons for God may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. You would have to show that all God concepts depend and derive from the Bible. Okay, so what you just said.
Okay, but there's actually an easy way for Stu to get out of this, but consider what Darth is talking about. You'd have to show that all God concepts come from the Bible. Darth has already stated to multiple people on multiple occasions that he believes that the only real definition of what a God is the God as defined in the Bible, the ultimate foundation for all that exists, that which grounds reality and makes all that is possible and impossible. Right? So if you concede that part of the argument, then you can be like, yeah, okay, you're saying that you're gleaning that from this text, and I think that this text and those concepts that you're reading, you believe are entailed by the description of this being within this text are fanciful. They're the products of men's imagination. That's my rationale. I'm not convinced that they're actually real. I don't see any reason. I don't see any representation in the rest of the world around me that what's being stated in this book is consistent with that being's description. And what I do see is a lot of similarities between how this being is being described and how other people have other narratives of supernatural beings have been described. So you're going to have to do a little bit more to maybe convince people who aren't on board with this.
Said, this is my second refutation of what you said is a non sequitur.
Well, to clarify,
it's not a non sequitur. It's only a non sequitur if you had asked for, if Stu is presenting you with some kind of, I mean, you could say it's a non sequitur in the sense that, like it doesn't follow, but you don't have to, like, I love this. Darth seizes on any opportunity to accuse somebody of what he thinks is a formal fallacy during an informal discussion. And it hasn't been made clear to Stu, and Darth should be able to recognize this at this point, that Stu is not presenting him with a deductive argument for the non-existence of the Christian God. He's presenting him with his reasons for his disbelief in that God. Darth should know this difference. Malpass has pointed it out to him. I've mentioned that dozens of times now. I mention that probably as often as Darth brings up Kai Nielsen. Shape-shifting monkey. Dan, you've been on a roll. Yep, been trying to catch up with some content. So, yeah, been kind of binging. All right, here we go.
When I say God, I'm talking just about the Abrahamic, or in the case of the Bible, the Christian God, which is one view.
Well, then you're advocating local atheism, not global atheism. Are you a global atheist?
Well, Christianity and Islam are the two main dominant religions next to Hinduism.
Okay, you're not.
So if I'm going to be taking atheism, global atheism.
Do you know the difference between? Do you understand the difference between a global and a local atheist?
So a global atheist is one who conforms to all gods. False, correct?
Okay. Are you a global atheist that takes the position there are no gods?
Yes.
Okay. So my position still stands. I refuted your position twice. Twice I demonstrated what you're saying is a non sequitur. Attacking the Bible, even if we were to agree that it was nothing more than a Bronze Age comic book, wouldn't get you that what is fundamental to all temporal states is not an eternal mind. So that's a non sequitur.
Right, that would be if Stu was making the argument that because people have made up stories about God, therefore it follows no gods can exist. Stu's not making that argument, though. Darth is assuming that every atheist makes that is making this argument as soon as he hears someone mention the fact that they think that these accounts of supernatural beings are made up by men. Right. And if they try to like push back on that, and like Malpass has done, and say, no, that's a reason for my lack of belief. That's my belief stance, that God exists only as some as a tale. It's a fictional character. That's it. That's what I'm convinced of. Like, oh, but you haven't provided me the argument for that. I think Darth truly believes he's internalized enough of this that if you don't have a deductive argument for the belief that you hold, then it's not a justified belief. But that's not always the case. And one could probably craft a deductive argument for, well, no, there wouldn't be. You don't have to craft a deductive argument for the non-existence of something in order to rationally justify a belief in that thing or the lack of belief in that thing. Those are they're in two different categories. Darth wants to conflate the two because he thinks, I don't know, I think it means he can get over on people. Good to see you, Jeff Trimble. Nice for you to join. Yeah, I think Jeff, you probably had multiple conversations with Darth, and then he did he give up on you? Probably must conceded that you're a reprobate. And thank you very much for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And yeah, Randolph says he's spoken with me 6 or 7 times. He also ranted about me in his private Discord guild for about 90 minutes. I think that was, yeah, consecutively, like in one go. Yeah, I can't remember why, but yeah, Randolph really got him wound up. There's another video coming out. Clubhouse, Daz from Clubhouse Debates sent me a link to it. He hasn't premiered it yet. I think he's going to premiere it in another couple of days. But this guy kind of gives me like he's another Canadian, and I think this is just an example of Darth being a little allergic to Canadians. But the guy's name is Hank, and they're having a discussion, and Hank he doesn't seem like he's philosophically minded. He's just trying to have a conversation. He's just trying to sort out what the hell Darth's talking about, and Darth is just getting more and more worked up about it. And it made me long for the days when we'd get that, and then we'd get the Meanwhile at the Legion of Doom, juxtaposition, and hear Darth talking crap about people in the background, which was obnoxious as hell. But to see him like dedicate, an hour and a half to coping over a conversation he had with somebody is always fun. So yeah, I think Randolph still holds that record.
But it would also point out the chance that the God of the Christian Bible
That's
You're
not
not
what
addressing what I'm
it's not
saying
what
to
he
you.
asked you, Stu. What you're just simply
Well,
saying.
Wait. Let me land my plane.
No.
and then
Wait a second, Stu.
Okay,
What you're
what is
just
the
saying
question?
is you're just simply saying when you tried to answer Darth's question, you mentioned the Bible. What you're really doing is just talking about why you don't accept Christianity. That doesn't answer the question.
Can you ask the question?
The
again?
rationale
Please
as to
respond
why
to
you're
what
an
I-
atheist.
Okay, this seems kind of stupid to me because they know why, right? For the same reason that they don't believe in Thor, right? They don't have a problem in accepting the fact that the Norse pantheon, the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, which is basically just Greek 2.0, and in the Egyptian pantheon, any of these other god and faith traditions, that those gods, those beings, are just creations of people, right? At least, right? I think some Christians, especially some of the some of the loonier ones in U.S. evangelical circles, would be like, well, no, Amaterasu, who's that guy? C. Paul. something. He's like kind of the de facto head of the New Apostolic Reformation. It's a group of Pentecostalists. He believes that that Japan, the nation of Japan, worships Amaterasu, and they are enthralled to Amaterasu. That is a dark spirit controlled by Satan. And it's the reason, it's part of the reason why Japan's economy faltered, I think, in 89, 90. It's just bonkers, right? So some of them will go even further. Like, they actually acknowledge the existence of other gods, but they're demons and stuff, and they're almost always bad guys. But yeah, this kind of thing, like, well, just because you're referring to the Bible as not being true, like, but that's what's informing people is not just the Bible. What's informing a lack of belief in the God of the Bible is not simply just okay, there's these accounts in these stories, and it's talking about supernatural affairs and supernatural beings and supernatural actions and miraculous deeds, all this kind of stuff, and you're like, okay, I'm skeptical, right? But you take into account that there's these other faith traditions that also have stories that kind of do the same thing, right? And you start to see a pattern where you start seeing people making up stories, and suspiciously, people will start asserting or just kind of inserting or creating these fanciful characters in places to explain away things that would otherwise be inexplicable. And you start seeing this pattern over and over and over again. And so all of them taken together, it kind of just, and maybe that is just inductively. You see this often enough. What Darth likes to say is like, well, no, what you're doing is called a genetic fallacy, because you're saying that God can't be real because basically, he doesn't put it this way, God can't be real because people are gullible and stupid and make up stories. That's not it. It's not the genetic fallacy. You're not blaming the source of it. You're not saying, well, because humans came up with this, I'm not going to accept it as being real. That doesn't make any sense. The idea is that as a concept, this is a shared concept across cultures, and in many cases, cultures, this is demonstrable in cultures that never interacted with each other before, came up with similar ways of explaining inexplicable phenomena. And okay, so it looks like there's something about people where we are driven to look for patterns, and we desire stories to help us explain things and make sense of the world around us. And part of that is about making up mythical and legendary people. That's not so bad. So that notion of like, well, you're just a local atheist because you think the Bible can't be trusted. I don't think Stu would say that. I think Stu's probably in the position that a lot of modern atheists would be, and that any account that is trying to justify the existence of supernatural beings as being important to the development or to the framing of reality, or necessary for the creation of or maintenance of our reality, those are outlandish claims, right? Those are out there. And that maybe the Bible isn't any more special than these other ones. Certainly, Johnny wouldn't take into account. I've seen Darth do this. He's talked with pagans before, pagans who claim to believe in pagan spirits and things like this, and Darth will take them to town, like, oh, you don't understand this, and you don't really believe that, and all this kind of stuff. He has absolutely no problem just disregarding those. Why? Because in his mind, pagan gods just explain away shadows in the forest, or the full moon, or the drought, and then the sudden rain that alleviated the drought. That's it's just these primitive impulses. But God explains away the problem of the one and the many, right? God explains away these inexplicable problems that medieval philosophers wrestled with. So checkmate, pagans.
Please respond to what I said to you. Okay, 3 times I've given you a refutation that what you have said is a non sequitur. The question is, disparaging the Bible, even if you are successful, doesn't get you to global atheism. You are a global atheist. So
yeah, but he wasn't disparaging the Bible. Worried your mental health might be too good, so you binge some Darth content? Or did the doctor warn you of low blood pressure? It was that. Yeah, it was getting a little too low. And so he's like, hey, do you have any techniques to crank that up? And I was like, yeah, hold my beer, doc. I like this. Tremble before tremble. Jeff, if you could, you probably ought to start using that as your name on Clubhouse. I think if you do that long enough, Darth will start talking to you again. To be fair, the position of global strong atheism is pretty much indefensible. The vast majority of atheists aren't strong global atheists. Yeah, probably not strong, but I don't think the idea of being a global atheist is really all that hard to defend. Especially if you're talking about the belief state. And this is, I think, AJ, this is probably the issue, and maybe you differ with me. My problem with this is, like, if somebody asks you if you're like a local or a global atheist, I'm a global atheist and I don't believe in any supernatural beings, right? But that's because of my belief state. I'm not convinced that any of those things are real, right? But if somebody said, hey, do you know for a fact that that no gods exist, right? Give or take some some clarifications and some properties in their in how they're being defined, well, then I'd have to say no, right? I can't know that, because and then you get into, and then you could get into some of those questions. Well, what do we mean when we talk about a god? Are we just talking about higher powers, beings of superior strength and intelligence or long life or whatever, or are we talking about the kind of god that Darth is defining, that kind of ultimate being? In that case, if any god, and it has to be defined as with the properties that Darth is talking about, I'm actually closer to being that one's pretty easy for me. Not only to say I'm a local strong atheist and that I don't think that God exists, but I actually feel like I'm getting closer to being confident in saying I know that being doesn't exist, because it has too many catastrophic and contradictory properties to exist. There's just too much going wrong there. But yeah, on the global side of things, like if somebody, what if there were gods? What if it wasn't a god like an ultimate thing that has all these contradictions? It was more like Zeus and Apollo and this kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, I can't say that I don't know something like that doesn't exist or never existed, or even cooler yet, never will exist. Maybe gods could emerge. Who knows?
I ask you, what is your rationale that there is no God? Now, typically when I talk with atheists, and they convey directly or indirectly that they're global atheists, and I ask them to give me a rationale, they bait and switch. They go from global atheism to local atheism, which is what you have done. Now, what I want
I'll talk
to
from
hear
a
from
global.
what I want
I'll
to,
talk
I'm
from a
talking,
global
I'm
perspective.
talking.
Yeah, I know.
Okay?
We know you talk a lot, Darth.
Okay, I'm talking. Yeah, okay. Listen, you're not going to be rude to me. Now,
I'm not trying to be rude, Darth. I apologize for talking over you.
I will repeat. Listen, I don't want to have to remove you back to the audience. Please stop being rude. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
I apologize.
What I want to hear from you is an answer to my initial question: is what is your rationale for atheism? I do not want to hear a verbal response, which is a bait and switch from global atheism to local atheism. What is your rationale for global atheism?
There is no religion that has been presented us from past to present that convinces me of any existence of any deity at any.
Okay, all that is a statement, is an autobiographical statement.
Yeah, referring to his belief state. It's not meant as an argument for the non-existence of those gods.
And is not a defense of global atheism.
Why would you say?
Well, a defense how of global atheism? This is actually kind of odd, right? Like, because as far as I know, atheism is just like, I mean, I know he likes to talk about worldviews and stuff like that, but if atheism is just being defined as the fact that you don't believe in gods, you lack belief in gods, or you positively believe that there are no gods, that's a belief state, and that's all atheism is. But Darth is now equating atheism with atheism is the positive presentation of a deductive argument against the existence of the Christian God. That seems to be what he's implying here. Maybe I'm wrong. That seems to be what he's putting forth. I would challenge anyone to find a philosopher that thinks that that's what atheism means. Atheism is we're talking about the belief position of an individual or individuals. And when you're asking for their reasons for that, a rational reason for that would be things like saying, I think that these things are stories. Right? Well, what do you mean? That can't be it. That can't be your argument for the non-existence of God, because then that would be a non sequitur. You're absolutely right. But you didn't ask me for the argument. You asked me what my belief was, and you asked me what my reasons were for that belief. Darth. I don't think he has any brothers and sisters. I think this is the problem. I think somebody like Darth, it's not to say that there's something wrong with being an only child, but I think for some personality types, they probably would have been better. They would have benefited had they grown up being buffeted by the forces of older and younger siblings checking them on their bullshit. Because Darth seems like the kind of guy that if he's not riddled with mental health issues, then he definitely was allowed to just kind of carry on in his own internal monologues for a long time, unchecked and unchallenged by people. Maybe a mom that doted on him, a dad that didn't care where his ideas went, where they rested, and without any siblings to be like, you know what, you know, Gary, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. Let's go to the mall. You're full of shit. Let's go outside and play. You're full of shit. Get a job. Something like that. Something to kind of snap him out of it. But instead, he's still just rolling in his own filth. It's weird. I'm late. I demand to know what this is about. It's about what it's always about. At this point, Peter, you could just go with what Otangelo always makes fun of me for. What's Spatchcock talking about? Is he talking about Darth Dawkins again? Yes. Yes, I'm talking about Darth Dawkins again.
Say that. Why is it not a defense?
Okay, listen carefully. What you have told me is what your mental state is, okay?
Right.
That you're unconvinced. Being unconvinced, it does not necessarily follow from that what is fundamental to all temporal states is not a mind or God, okay? That's a non sequitur.
Yeah, it's my subjective point of view. Exactly.
All you've done is you've given me an
Okay, that should have been a clue right there that Stu is saying, yeah, it's my subjective point of view. Okay, yeah, so he's talking about his belief state. He's not talking about an argument. If Darth was really being honest about asking a concise question, then he should just shut the fuck up with all this nonsense and say, I want you to present me a logical, deductive argument for the non-existence of the Christian God. That's all he has to do. And he's not doing that. He's asking cagey questions, and when he's getting answers that Stu thinks satisfy the questions that Darth answers, Darth then instead assumes that Stu is either Stu is dodging, or he is avoiding the reality of it, or this is not what usually happens. If anybody who's actually been, if you can remember back to an initial conversation you ever had with Darth, especially if you didn't know much about him, the questions that he asks you do not exactly fill you with any kind of confidence that you understand what he's talking about. And so you do your best to answer the question, especially when you're like, okay, well, by that you mean, and then he starts hollering at you because he doesn't want you to try to seek clarification. These are not the actions of someone who is being concise and succinct. These are the actions of someone who is being emotionally abusive, manipulative, and frankly, fucking creepy. Anytime somebody is presenting any conversation like this, you're not giving me the answers that I want, well, then you need to ask better questions or communicate better. Your inability to seek to seek information from me, that it's not my fault that the responses that I'm giving you do not satisfy you. Maybe you're asking the wrong person. Maybe you're asking the questions the wrong way. Maybe look a little bit inward. This isn't what Darth does. Darth thinks that his script is perfect, throws it out there. It almost universally gets the same reactions from people, except for a strange group of possibly fellow schizophrenics who kind of oh, okay, I'll follow along with this. It sounds like a recipe to get radicalized, and then just right. It's an interesting way to kind of weed people out. It's interesting to me that Darth Dawkins, I think he kind of likes the Joker from those movies, but consider that kind of character. The Joker from the Nolan movies was the kind of guy, all the guys that kind of followed along with him were kind of these crazy people where the Joker's kind of shtick worked on them. It kind of appealed to him. I think Bruce Wayne or Batman says something about that. These guys are kind of crazy, and the kind of crazy that the Joker's putting out, it's like kismet. They're just attracted to it. Darth's kind of the same way. Sorry, Warren, but I think you're probably in that same group too. And I know Praise isn't in that same group. Praise is just lonely and desperate since Smokey, his last girlfriend had to go to jail or whatever he's doing. Put the ankle bracelet on.
Biographical statement, autobiographical statement about your mind.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't follow that you have a mental state. Okay. It doesn't follow that you have a mental state that you believe or don't believe in God, that therefore God does or does not exist. That's a non sequitur.
But of course, but everyone has their own subjective autobiographical statement. Just like you believe in a God, I don't. Albert doesn't. Murphy does.
What I believe is irrelevant to you.
I agree. What you believe is irrelevant, Darth. Thank you for that. Tyler West, thank you for the super chat. Darth absorbed his twin in the womb. Yeah, he probably challenged him to an argument, and when they failed to get the answers that he needed, that he had pre-programmed in his head, and they didn't come back the exact way he imagined. Yeah, he probably ate him. Thank you for that super chat. Okay, where was Darth saying? Oh yeah, that his thoughts are irrelevant. What he thinks is irrelevant.
You answering the question. The question is, I asked you to give me a rationale for global atheism, telling me that you have a mental state that you.
Okay, so now it's changing a little bit. Now he wants a rationale from Stu. He wants a rationale for global atheism. Okay, well that's a little bit interesting.
You are unpersuaded. It doesn't follow from that there is no God, and in fact, that's what we call a classical appeal to ignorance, which I will be glad to explain to you. Now,
Okay.
Do you actually have a rational defense for global atheism that what is fundamental to all things is not an eternal mind, God?
Okay. The belief in God comes from ignorance.
That's it. Okay. That's the genetic fallacy.
I don't think that's a genetic fallacy. Let me wind that back again.
Fundamental to all things is not an eternal mind, God.
Okay. The belief in God comes from ignorance.
That's it. Okay. That is.
I think this is interesting.
It doesn't relevant to you answering the question. The question is, I asked you to give me a rationale for global atheism, telling me that you have a mental state that you are unpersuaded. It doesn't follow from that there is no God, and in fact, that's what we call a classical appeal to ignorance, which I will be glad to explain to you.
I don't think that he would get it right, or he'd get the definition right, but the fact that he's applying it to this particular circumstance is probably wrong.
Now, Do you actually have a rational defense for global atheism that what is fundamental to all things is not an eternal mind, God?
That's not, atheism is not the opposite of that position. That would be an aspect of atheism. So Darth has actually just injected his own definition in there, right? Like the Christian position is that what is ultimate and foundational to all of reality is the mind of God, is an unembodied mind of God. And atheism is the belief that that's not what is foundational but that's not what atheism is. Right? Especially when he was just talking about global atheism. Now he's talking about local atheism. Christianity posits the existence of this particular God, or so Darth claims, that that's the God in question. The mind of God necessary for the foundation. He is the absolute ultimate source of all that is and is possible and impossible as a mind. Okay. And atheism is the opposite of that. Local atheism or global atheism, right? If you push back on that, you'd be like, it's the same thing because any God as defined as this God. Well, it just so happens that that's the God. So he's basically just he has kind of fulfilled what I stated in the beginning. He couldn't have engaged Stu, even hypothetically, by attempting to just conditionally accept that the Bible is nothing more than a glorified comic book, but it doesn't follow that means there's no God. Yeah, it does, because Darth is stating that God, as revealed in Scripture and in reality, is definitionally the God that is the mind that is the foundation for all of reality. And now he's defining atheism as the belief that what is foundational to reality isn't the mind of God. That sounds a little bit more like local atheism there to me. So Darth is losing the plot, but that's not surprising.
Okay. The belief in God comes from ignorance.
That's it. Okay. That's the genetic fallacy that you just committed.
You gave me a reason. That's my rational reason.
That's a genetic fallacy.
But it comes from a position of ignorance. That's my stance.
No, you're not understanding. You're not understanding. Okay. The fact that the fact that people, a collection of people, may have faulty reasoning by which they conclude God, it doesn't follow from that because they have faulty reasoning that God doesn't exist.
But wouldn't it though? I mean, because isn't it the case that atheists can be disregarded because they can be demonstrated to have faulty reasoning? Like all the arguments for the not God world could fail, but that doesn't mean the not God world isn't true. I don't think Darth would like this stuff if it was, pivoted back around on him. And hey, Oz, good to see you. That's a fun thought. Meeting drunk Darth after I've had a few, it would end with him getting the fallacies beat out of him. I'm just saying. I think and I wouldn't be surprised to find out if Darth was like one of these only child. He was an only child with, although maybe he's not. Other people could probably tell me about this. Hell, I think even J.L. Warren might know if Darth had siblings, or if he's ever mentioned his siblings in the past. But then again, Veckel is a guy, I think he's got a big family with lots of brothers and sisters, but he went a different path. Like he's the crazy one that when he shows up on Thanksgiving, he's the one that everybody is like, oh my God, here's this. And Veckel uses that as just further reinforcement for how he's right and the rest of his family are just idiots and morons. Yeah, it's cool. And by the way, hello, Germania. Good to see you back. I understand the need to take breaks from time to time. I'm doing the exact opposite of that. I'm in the process of burning myself out. So yeah, we're kind of in opposite schedules, but we'll meet in the middle somewhere.
So what you have just uttered is a fallacy.
No, Warren, he hasn't actually done that. Remember what Darth said I don't know when you came in on this. Warren writes, Darth has been asking many times to provide this argument that Stu is too thick to answer is not his problem. This is not a problem just for Stu. This happens all the time. This is a pattern for Darth. Darth claims to be succinct and concise. If he was being succinct and concise, the proof for that would be him asking succinctly and in a concise manner, provide me with a deductive argument for the lack of for the non-existence of the Christian God. That's it, right? It should be obvious. Darth has been doing this for 10 plus years at this point, and he's 60 some years old. He's old enough to be everybody's dad. And he acts like he's old enough to be even the 70 and 80-year-olds' dads when they come on here. He should know at this point, but he can't because he doesn't have good social skills, and because I think there's really something not quite clicking right there. He doesn't understand when people are just trying to give him the answer for why they lack belief or why they believe there is no God, and not going into the philosophical, oh, you want an argument, premises, conclusion as to why the Christian God doesn't exist. That's all Darth has to ask for. And if he was interested in being succinct and concise, he would simply ask it that way. But that's not what he does. He comes into conversations like this, lies in wait, and asks these questions. And even though it should be apparent after the second time, at the latest the second time, even the first time, if somebody answers like, "Oh, I don't believe in God because I just think the stories are false." If Darth wants an argument, then that's the point where no. I don't want your reason for why you don't believe in God. I want to know if you have an argument for the non-existence of the Christian God. Problem solved, confusion cleared up, they could go on from there. And if Stu's like, no, actually, I don't have a deductive argument for the non-existence of the Christian God, then Darth can just say like, okay, well, until you have one, then I don't want to talk anymore. But Darth wants to talk. This is about him verbally abusing people and winding them up and twisting them around. This is a way of inducing Stockholm syndrome in somebody. If Darth put you through this wash, rinse, repeat, kind of thing, and it worked on you, my apologies. He bamboozled you.
Well,
Okay.
I would say, yeah, but if we're going back to what you're saying about it's a fallacy, right? That does
Do
stand
you
to
agree or
reason
disagree that what you just said is a fallacy?
I disagree. I believe it is a...
Okay,
Okay, I want to point something out here. I'm sorry to pause again. I'm going to read this. People make excuses that his questions are malformed. If this is true, why does he trip up atheists every time? if you need me to explain that, this is you're sort of answering the question. You sort of already answered this question. Is it possible that the reason he's tripping up everyone he asks is because his questions are malformed? I think the other question you should ask is, I think that that's probably likely. Are they intentionally malformed to cause somebody to trip up? Or are they just sloppy? Or some combination of the two? Is it possible for Darth to be incompetent and malicious? You already know my feelings on this. Stated them at the front. Of course. I think he's an idiot and a weasel.
Okay, explain. So you see, if everybody on the planet who's ever lived, for whatever reason, had incorrect reasoning by which they concluded, therefore, God, it doesn't follow from that there's no God. Kai Nielsen is a top atheist philosopher. He was selected by the Encyclopedia Britannica to write the entry for atheism. He stated in one of his books on atheism.
Every time.
All of the reasons.
Wait, is this the second time he said that? This is the second. I mean, I've been covering enough of these, and I've been doing it almost daily that it's starting to throw me off. I think that's the second time he's introduced Kai Nielsen in the same conversation. Maybe not. People let me know, because this is probably all starting to kaleidoscope on me. It's happened. I've lost my mind. Now it's officially time to stop covering Darth videos.
For God may fail, but it still can be the case that God exists. So
But
again,
it
I refuted.
It also can apply the other way.
Listen,
The pendulum.
can you please focus?
Stu's making a good point there. That's something that Darth never talks about. Kai Nielsen's point about that is not that, like, all the arguments for God may fail, but that doesn't mean that the God couldn't exist. Yes, because deductive arguments only take you so far, unless they happen to be the deductive arguments that Darth is cozy with, and then he thinks those deductive arguments somehow make the truth what the truth is. I have a valid argument, therefore it's sound, therefore that's truth. He doesn't understand the entailment of what Kai Nielsen was saying there, because if you flip it around, it's just it follows just the same. All the arguments for the not God world may fail. That does not entail that the not God world is false.
On what I am saying to you.
Yeah, you've repeated
I'm choosing my words
twice.
carefully. Now,
Okay.
Now,
No,
what you've just said
does not choose his words carefully.
is a fallacy. The fact that the proposition that God exists, that people use faulty reasoning.
I didn't say that you were mentally ill because you're convinced by the precept argument. I said that there's an aspect, I think, of a kind of what do they call that? Psychological transference that happens, kind of living vicariously through another person, that somebody watching Darth Dawkins might feel like he's kicking against the pricks, like he's beating up on people, like, right? Like, it's a dopamine hit, right? It's actually one of the fundamental problems of human psychology, and it's actually normal psychology, that people get a greater dopamine hit from seeing people get justice meted out rather than people being treated to something merciful. This is a known thing. So the idea of watching somebody like Darth and then being able to join Team Darth, so that you know that now that you're in the right when you get here, you can experience that dopamine hit vicariously through him, right? So if you tended towards that kind of thing, and then you run across somebody like Darth who's really cranking it up to about 10 or 11 on the wacky, I'm going to condemn all these stupid skeptics and show them how dumb they are according to my calicoed together Frankenstein's monster of a theology, then yeah, that sounds like a cool ride. You can get your dopamine kick just riding his coattails. That's not necessarily an aspect of a mental illness per se, but there can be quite a bit mentally unhealthy about that. I have, however, accused Darth Dawkins and have speculated wildly about the possibility that he has mental illness. Absolutely. In your case, maybe the jury's still out. However, I remember that when you were you were a guest on Pine Creek's show, and Pine Creek brought up the idea. I think he asked if your fiance was a Christian, and I believe you said no. And then I think he started to kind of tongue-in-cheek say something about you being unequally yoked with a non-believing spouse, and it sounded like you were seriously considering breaking that off. If it turns out you gave up a interpersonal relationship with your fiance in exchange for the dopamine kick you get from living vicariously through Darth's verbal abuse on social media, you should probably seek help. I'm not saying that because I can diagnose you or anything. I'm saying that just as a fellow human being. Seek fucking help. Stat. Because that's not a good, that you might not be in a great place.
To conclude that God exists, it doesn't follow from that because their reasoning is faulty, that God doesn't exist. That's a non sequitur.
But it can also point to the fact that he doesn't exist as well.
No, do you understand that that's, please respond to what I said. You are ignoring what I am saying to you. I have explained to you in detail why what you have just said is a non sequitur. It does not follow.
But you can't verify that the God of the Christian Bible is the same God we're talking
You're
about.
You're now baiting and switching again.
Okay, Warren. He just said that I'm like one of Joker's mad, crazy, murderous underlings. I want to see his evidence. That was clearly hyperbole, right? Okay, I'm not saying that you're part of a murderous, nihilistic death cult, although you have become Christians. So, and in this country, that's pretty damn close. I thought atheists were all about evidence for claims. Sure. If Darth Dawkins is the Joker, you being in here, rhetorically washing his balls for him is evidence that you are in his group. So if you took that to be literal, I apologize. It was meant to be hyperbole and kind of tongue-in-cheek. But yeah, my evidence is your behavior.
Yeah.
Because when you say God, which God are you talking about? That's what I'm asking.
Okay, you're baiting and switching again. What was my initial question to you?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Which God are we referring?
If you keep that up, you're going to get fucking banned, Warren. If you do not understand nuance and you're going to insist on doing stuff like this, you're going to get fucking banned. Knock that shit the fuck off. If this is the kind of shit that you are gleaning from this, you were doing this before. I think this is interesting. You were in a video in the live chat that was about you having a conversation with a variety of other atheists. And you were in there under this username referring to the Mac that was having the conversation in the third person as if that wasn't you. Is that not implicitly a type of bearing false witness? You were lying to people for giggles, and you're doing this now as a Christian. So I would challenge you at this point while you're trying to figure out, like, I'm slandering you, you're going to hold me to a moral standard. What moral standard could you possibly hold me to when, upon your relatively recent conversion to Christianity, you have taken to lying to people for fun? And then you wonder why I think you might be going down a weird path. Think about that.
Referring to?
What was my initial question to you?
My evidence for the non-existence of God.
I said, what is the rationale?
The rationale. Sorry, my rationale.
Okay.
I
ask you, okay, I would appreciate it if you would stop over talking me. The only time I interject while you're speaking is because you are ignoring what I am saying to you. Now, we'll go back to square one again. What is your rationale that there is no supreme being, creator God? I would like you to give me at least one reason. He does not exist. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for an answer, sir. That's waiting. Okay.
Hang on, folks. I think this, I don't know what got slid over, but the video got. I tried to move a tab and the screen took off. Let's see, Chrome. There we go. All right, there we go. Let me take this back a few seconds.
stop over talking me. The only time I interject while you're speaking is because you are ignoring what I am saying to you. Now, we'll go back to square one again. What is your rationale that there is no supreme being, creator God?
Can I give you a set of reasons, since that's what a rationale is?
I would like you to give me a reason why there is no supreme being, creator God.
It's just that rationale is generally plural. It's a set of.
I would like you to give me at least one reason.
He does not exist.
I'm waiting.
What?
I am waiting for an answer, sir.
That's begging the
Okay.
question.
Stu,
It
if you're not
is begging the
married,
question. No, guys, it's okay. I'm thinking.
Okay, everyone
I'm thinking.
else,
Give me a
stop
break.
talking. Stu, I'm waiting for your answer.
There is not enough evidence that he exists.
Okay, now, all you're simply saying is, okay, when you say there's no evidence for God, that can mean one of two things.
No.
Yeah, he didn't say that. He said there's not enough evidence for God. So again, this is why this is a problem. He's asked and answered this many times. Stu, at this point, after talking to him for what, 10, 12 minutes now, I think, 15, is still giving him reasons for his belief state, why he believes there is no God. And Darth takes those opportunities when and Stu is like, okay, he takes his time and then he gives him a different one, right? Clearly he can't give him the one where he's like, well, the reason I'm not a believer is because I think these stories about gods are just that. They're just stories. All right. But Darth wants to call that the genetic fallacy, even though it's not, and that it's a non sequitur, even though it's not part of really a deductive syllogism. If Stu is taking that to be, hey, what's your reason for disbelief? And Stu's giving it, right? Stu's still doing that now. And what does Darth do? Darth takes that thing, and instead of correcting him, like, dude, I'm not asking you for for what your reason is for your personal belief state. I'm asking you to provide me with an argument for the non-existence of the Christian God. And what's he do? He's taking this reason. He's going to try to figure out how to pigeonhole that into a malformed deductive argument, as if that's equivalent to someone stating the reason for why they're not convinced there's a God, or the reason they believe no gods exist. And he doesn't even get it right. He has to exaggerate it and say, oh, you said there's no evidence. That's not what Stu said. Stu said, well, there's not enough evidence.
I said there's not
Either,
enough.
okay, please.
There's
okay,
not
did
enough.
I not ask you not to talk? Did I not ask
You're
you not to
rephrasing what I
overtalk?
said, Darth.
If you overtalk me again, I will remove you from the
Okay,
stage.
well, I'll end the conversation because you're rephrasing what I said.
Good. Tap out, because then you have no defense for atheism. Okay, this is what they're left with. They ignore what you say. They bait and switch. They go from global atheism to local atheism, and they do it several different times.
Darth did that at least once in this conversation, as I pointed out earlier.
Right? And then they sit there, they move their lips, pretending like they're defending atheism, but he's not.
But that's the difference, though. Like, I really do think that Darth believes he's being succinct and concise and oddly enough honest when he's asking a person for the reason why they're an atheist, and then when they give their reason, he then tells them that that's an insufficient defense for atheism writ large. That's not what he asked. Right? The reason that I'm not a believer is not a defense for atheism as some worldview or some kind of position. I wouldn't tell anyone that it is. I think most atheists are probably motivated by the fact that they tend to believe that these are just stories. I think I probably have that in common with most atheists and skeptics. But that wouldn't be the only reason for that belief state. The belief that there is no Christian God specifically, or there are no gods in general. But this crap that he's bringing up, that is not being concise or succinct or honest or disciplined or thoughtful or thorough or circumspect. Nothing about this is. This is just shitty Mott and Bailey fallacies and bait and switch tactics. Like all the bait and switching that he's accusing Stu of doing is what he's doing. I asked you for your reason, and then you gave it to me, and then I demand to know how you think that that's even in any way a sufficient defense for atheism as a worldview. Oh, is that all? So my advice, if Stu ever sees this, and if he's watching, Stu, if you ever run across Darth again, remember, when he asks you for this, all he's asking for is a deductive argument for the non-existence of God. And for anybody else, too. Never give him your reasons for your belief. There's no point. There's no point in telling him anything autobiographical about yourself in terms of how you came to believe that there are no gods, or why you lack conviction, or you lack a belief in them. None of that is important. That you think that they're stories or anything like that. Now, if you can take something about the capacities and the tendencies of mankind to create those kinds of stories and put that into a valid deductive argument, to show the non-existence, the lack of actual existence of the Christian God, that could be a hell of an argument, and that would be close enough. But yeah, engaging with Darth, if you think that you're engaging conversationally with him and he's just asking, hey, why don't you believe? That's not what he's doing at all. The interesting thing, though, I think, is that if you were to anticipate this and then try to present him with an argument, my guess is he wouldn't get it. Now, this was the guy that was called out for affirming the consequent and then could not understand that being shown this by people sympathetic to his inability to understand it, slowly walking him through it step by step, multiple times, listening to him get worked up and tell them that they're wrong, only to find out a few days later, a few weeks later, that he did finally get it, and then credited no one for assisting him, and never acknowledging that he got it wrong. Not a trace of humility left in him. So, textbook Darth.
He
says, "Oh, there's not enough evidence." Well, did he defend that proposition?
Darth, you had the high ground. Don't continue.
Don't tell me what to do.
Wow. Did you catch that?
Hey,
I'm going to play it again.
Did he defend, but he's not.
He
says, "Oh, there's not enough evidence." Well, did he defend that proposition?
Darth, you had the high ground. Don't continue.
Darth never had the high ground. I mean, he really didn't. If he'd had the high ground, he would have been honest in his intentions and asked for the argument, instead of luring Stu around by the nose, letting Stu think that, well, all that Stu had to provide him was just his reasons for why he believes in atheism, essentially, for lack of a better way of putting it. He believes there are no gods. So T is basically trying to tell him now, look, the dude's gone. You can stop coping. You can stop running him down. He's gone. He's not here. Everyone in this room takes your point. Maybe take the win. Darth's response?
Don't tell me what to do.
Hey,
don't tell me what to do. What a fucking prick. Warren, talk to your boy.
T, can I ask you can I question you on something you said earlier?
Of course.
So you said that if flower, then God, flower, therefore God. You mentioned that to be an inductive argument. How do you define
inductive, right? Yeah.
This gets kind of weird, but I want to highlight this first. Justin, thank you for the super chat. Just had a thought. Unclear if Didi even understands the difference between how and why, and he frequently abuses this. Yeah, I wonder it too, because when he gets into it, it seems clear to me the longer I've watched this stuff that what he's really obsessed with is the why. He likes the idea that the biblical narrative and the notion of the Christian God provides a telos. It provides a why and purpose for that which exists. And then he can get kind of dismissive about other kinds of hows, like even theological ones. Like when somebody asks him, "Hey, did all those babies that get flooded out, did their souls go to heaven, or did their souls go to hell?" And then he concocts a crazy defense that no one in Christianity, I've never heard anyone in Christianity ever use. Maybe God just stopped them from having kids. That way, when the time came to run the waterworks, the only people that suffered and drowned we're all of legal adult age or something. I mean, it's fucking bonkers, right? So when it comes to explanations of how he will entertain all sorts of crazy hypotheticals, even some hypotheticals that seemingly violate what one should gather, what one should read from the scriptures. So he's sort of dismissing the power of special revelation, and then on top of that, but that's all justified in service of the why. So yeah.
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 How do
So
you-
I was simply pointing out that, okay,
I understand.
that's a separate-
Wait. So the question is that I understand that to be deductive. How do you get that to be inductive?
Oh, I'm sorry. My understanding of deductive would be a logical disjunction, right? Either this or that.
Not necessarily that. Yes, that would be deductive, but that's not all a deductive argument can be.
Not this, therefore that. That would be a deduction.
See what I mean? I think he's talking about deduction as if it's one or the other. Like in the word deduction, you can gather like, but deductive is. I mean, I think maybe Johnny actually comes. Johnny or Matt Adams actually
Right.
gives.
Whereas a syllogism, or I'm sorry, a inference would take the form of a logical conjunction, right? It would be this
modus ponens to be inductive.
There's a induction in the it's P if P then Q. That's an induction, right?
No.
Or an inference rather.
No.
It's an inference. Yeah. See, yeah, this guy's getting some of his terms mixed up.
Inference. My bad.
I've always understood deductive versus inductive in a nutshell to be that deductive goes from the general to the specific, and the inductive goes from specific to the general. Does that sound right?
Maybe.
I think that is correct.
I have to understand.
Induction would be
God.
all the swans I've encountered are white, therefore all swans are white.
That is an example of a fallacy, not of induction. Like probabilistically, if it's probabilistically, the fallacy is made when you try to turn something inductive or probabilistic into something deductive, which is what Darth just kind of. That's not what induction is. Induction isn't automatically someone screwing that up like Darth did. Well, I love the way Darth presents it. Well, induction is, well, since every swan I've ever seen is white, then that must mean all swans are white. Yeah, that's a fallacy, right? But it's based on inductive logic. It can be reasonably assumed that swans are white because all the swans that have ever been encountered are white. So probabilistically, it's true that swans are white until you encounter one that throws that off, right? That's why induction always has that little caveat, right? Then it can be, you can reform it, right? That's the whole point. An inductive argument is up for revision as soon as you get new information.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there, Darth. That would be like an inductive case. You're not saying that all.
Well, there's a possibility of an inductive.
Swans
Never
are
mind.
white, but in virtue of it, I have like a plausible reason to understand it to be that all swans are white. But it's not like in the same way that when you ask for like an argument against the Christian God, Darth, you're not like asking for an inductive case. You're asking for a deductive case, which would actually be like if like I know it's logically impossible, but if I could give a modus ponens argument against God, then that would be a deductive argument. You understand modus ponens starts to be deductive, right?
Oh, I guess that's it. Sorry about that. I don't need to get into one of Nathan's videos. All right, yeah, but that's it for that one. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Yeah, kind of try to keep these around an hour or an hour and a half. Yeah, defining by example is a good indication that the speaker doesn't understand the principle. Yeah, especially when the example that Darth gave there is a demonstration of a fallacy that can be committed with induction, not just an example of inductive reasoning. But people, I remember years ago, he was having Darth was having a conversation with a couple of people. It might have been my brother and a YouTuber named Barney Tierspel. Bright guy. He's from Croatia, YouTuber from Croatia, and he was trying to make this argument. I think they were discussing, of all things, they might have been having a discussion about abortion or something. And Barney was kind of doing this thing with inductive logic and talking about what it means probabilistically. And maybe it was Jesus is Lord. I think he's had those conversations with rebuke and reprove as well. But yeah, it wasn't going well. It's odd to me still to think that I really do think that Darth thinks that there's like something categorically wrong with appealing to inductive, anything inductive, because I think he hates I think he hates science, and I don't think he understands the scientific method. But he seems to have a real problem with the notion that you can revise information. You can revise inductive arguments with new information comes online, and that the fact that it could completely upend the explanation and totally change things, which is something that I think is kind of fascinating about like aspects of the scientific method. Darth seems to find terrifying and wants to get away from. All right, let's stop that screen. Okay, so yeah, with that, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody in the live chat. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. I appreciate it. It's very generous. That always goes toward, as Alpha K91 and I call it, my caffeine fund, even though my consumption of caffeine is way down. I'm going to probably do another one of these later in the week. There's going to be a couple more coming out. Clubhouse Debates has a few more coming out. I will probably try to get a review in. I might do a review of the one that Danny was involved in, the one between Danny and Mac, and I think Jack and Tom are in there as well. I think there's a few things to point out, but it may not even really be worth my time to review. If you haven't watched it, go take a look at it, especially towards the tail end. I think Danny does a really good job, makes some really good points in that one. So if you haven't seen it, go take a look. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. I hope all of you have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, whatever it is, wherever you're at. Thank you for the super sticker, Secular Pagan Mom. Really appreciate it. Thanks. And I think I'm going to wrap it up here. No real announcements or anything coming up. I'm going to try to keep doing these throughout the rest of the month. Things are going to be getting a little bit busier as I'm going into another round of some things. I'm going to have a lot of appointments coming up. So next couple of weeks, these might slow down a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep, instead of doing one every day, I'm going to try to get maybe at least one out a week as things get busier, but we'll see how it goes. All right, folks, with that, I'm going to play the little video and we will be out of here. Good night, good luck, and I will catch you all later.